Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. In this video I will be discussing about function, and also I will be discussing about different topics which are related to function. So we will discuss about how to create function, how to call function, how to give different parameters to function, and then finally we will be discussing about scope of variables also at the end of this video. So let's start with the function. If you want to define or give a definition to function, we will say it is a block of reusable code which we are using it to do a specific task. So if we have multiple lines of code, and these multiple lines of code or for doing a specific task, so we want to put this all multiple or block of code inside a function. Why? Because we want to reuse this block of code. So whenever we want to have a block of code and we want to reuse this block of code, we will put them inside a function. So now this was the reason that we were using function. Now let's come to the point. So if we want to create a function and if we want to use a function, what are the procedure? There are two important procedures. The first one is nothing but defining a function. The second one is calling a function. So for defining a function, we can give another name also, which is nothing but creation of a function. How can we create a function? Then once we are creating a function, we can use that function. So we will be discussing the first one, how to define a function. Whenever we want to define or create a function, the first important topic is the keyword of def. Def is a keyword in Python that whenever we want to create a function, we want to define a function, we have to use this keyword. This is important keyword. The second one, we have to give a function name. So based on that topic or based on that job or based on the task that this function will be doing, we have to give a function name for that. And then here we have to specify the parameters. Or if we give a informal name for the parameters, they're nothing but the inputs for this function. So this will be our function name and these will be the inputs this function. Here it will come the body of the function. So what we are saying, we will say this will be the inputs to this function. We will give this input to this function, and here we will process the input. So we will do some process to the input, and finally we will return the output or the value. So three important topics that we have in function will be the input, and then what we will do on the input or how we will process the input, and here we will return the output. So there are important things that we have to take care in every function that we have. So let's give an example of a function. For example, if we have a function called calculation of average, if we, for example, we have three subjects and we want to calculate their average and return the value. So the first thing, we have to use the def keyword, and then we will have to give the name for this function. So usually we know, since the name of the function is average, so we will give the marks for subject 1, the marks for subject 2, and then the marks for subject 3. And then this will be the input to our function. Now let's come here and discuss about the body of our function, what we will do in the body of function. We know that this is Python. For Python we have to take care of indentation also. Since we are writing inside this function, we have to indent. So I will write my result is nothing but equal to, I will say the marks for subject 1, the marks for subject 2, and the marks for subject 3. I will add all of them, and then since I want to find the average, so I will divide by 3. And then I will say, finally I will say return the result. See, this was my inputs, and then here I have defined how to process the input, and finally I am returning the value, I am returning the output. There are three important things in function. So this is something, the creation of a function. In creation of function, these are important things. This is the keyword, this is the name of function, this is something that I can use by myself, and these are my inputs that I have defined. I have three parameters, I have three inputs. This is the body of my function. This is how I will process on the input, and I will return the value. The next topic that I need to discuss is about calling a function. Calling a function is nothing but using a function. Once I am creating a function, once I have created a function, how can I use that function? This is an important thing. For calling a function, usually we have to take the name of a function and we have to give the number of inputs. Why? Because we have created this function for doing operation on these inputs. So now let's discuss an example for this function. For example, we have a function called average, and how can we use it? Say once we are using this function, we have to take the name of this function. So we will say a average. So I need to come here, and then I will say average this is the name of function. I have to give three inputs. For example, in the subject 1 I have 90, the subject 2 I have 95, and the subject 3 I have 94. These are my marks. So what this function will do, this function will take this three subjects marks, and then it will calculate the average, and it will return the result to me. So once it's returning the result, I have to take another variable to store my result, for example avg, and then after that I can print the value of this. I will say the average marks is, the average marks is, and then I can print the average. So once I will run this one, see, so let's see what is this say. Say I have to give a comma here. So the average mark is 93. So this was my function. Now here I have defined my function, I have created my function, here I have used my function. When I was using my function, this is so much important thing that I have to give my function name, my function inputs. Since this function has output, I have to take another variable also. When it's returning the output, I have to store the output here, and I print here. So this is important thing about how to define and how to call a function. Now let's discuss about default parameter values. As here I was saying that my function has three parameters, but they had no default values. So now let's come and discuss how to give default parameter values. So for meaning of default parameter values, so sometimes we have a function with some inputs, that those inputs have some default values. If user is providing some new values, that input will take the new value, but if the user is not providing, it will take its own or default values. For example, if we have a function called, for example, we will say find power, we have a function called find power. So this will take two inputs. The first one will be the number, it will take the number from you, and the second it will take the power. So it will say it will reach this number to this power, and we want to give the default value of 2. It means that once for example, if we will go to the body, we will say result is equal to, and then we will say number power. So what we are saying here, it has two input, the first and the second one. The first one is a normal input or the normal parameter. The second one is a default value argument. Means that if the user is providing a new value for this one, this 2 will be replaced. But if user is not providing any value, the power will be always 2. It has a default argument called 2. Then we will say return result. So now let's discuss and call this function that how it will process. So we have find. So we have to take and once it is finding the value, we will print the value directly. So we'll find power. So it's taking two input. The first one is the number, and the second is the power of that number. So first I will say 2, 3. So it will say, once it will say find power. So here I have made a mistake. So find power. See, it is 2 power 3. See, if I'm not giving, what it does, 2 is stored inside num, and 3 is coming and stored inside power. 2 is already replaced. So if I say 4 power 3, so now 4 is stored inside num and 3 is stored inside power. So if I'm not giving this 3, what will happen? So this function has two input, but I have provided only one input. Since one is default value, so 4 will be stored here and power will be 2. So this is something that we are saying that default parameter values. Now let's discuss about another topic and function that's nothing but variable length argument. As I was discussing for you that here my function called find power has two input, and here my function called average has three input. So now let's discuss about a type of function that can we create a function with, for example, variable length of arguments. For example, it can take two input, it can take three input, four input, five input. So how many input that we want, it must be able to take. For example, if we have a function called we'll say for example hello, we have a function called say hello, and here I will say a name. For example, I will say name 1 comma name 2. So let's discuss about this one. So I will say print, I'll say hello, and then I will provide here name 1. And the same thing I will do here, I will just copy paste this one, and I will say hello name 2. So this function that I have provided here as of now, if I call this function, I will say hello. I can only give two names. The first name I will, for example, it will be Ahmed, the second name will be, for example, Ali. Now if I run it, it will say hello Ahmed, hello Ali. But if I want to provide the third name, for example, Karim, now it will give error. Why? Because I have already specified that it will take only two input. It will not take more than two input. This is something that I have already specified. So now let's discuss about this. If I provide a variable length argument, so I will say my function should be able to take how many argument it wants to take. So for that, I can use the first one and the second one. The first one is nothing but args with one star. This will enable my function so that my function must be able to take how many inputs that it can take. For example, if I read star name, then here I can do like this. I will say for name inside names. So I will put here names, and then what I will do, I will print. I will just say hello, and then I will provide name. So here in this argument that I have now I have provided here, this can take any number of names that I want. For example, now I have three names. If I run it, it will take three names. I can provide now four names. For example, Jama, take four name also. So this is nothing but arbitrary number of arguments. My function now can take any number of input that I will give. It will not give any error to me. The second will be double star. In double star, it will also take a variable length of argument, but it will be in terms of keyword and value. It will not be only in terms of value. So now let's discuss and say about this an example. For example, I will say if I have another function called, for example, Dave, I will say show. I will have a function called show, and then I will have double star. I will have some, for example, variables or some values, or I will say some variables, and then here I will come here. So this one, when I'm using double star, it is also variable length. It means I can give any number of input, but this input that I'm giving to this function will be with key and value. It will not be alone. So that's why I will say for key comma value inside var.items, since it will be in terms of dictionary. Then I can here come and say print key comma value. So now let's use, now I have defined the function. Now let me show this function. How can I use? So I'm calling this function. The first one I was saying the age for this person is 12. The name for this person is Ali, and then I will say that the address for this person is nothing but Kabul. See here, this one is also a variable length argument, but here what is interesting is I'm giving both key value, key value, key and value. Now let me run this one. See, it is saying age 23, name Ali, address Kabul. If I put double star, it must be in terms of key and value. And the third topic that I need to discuss related to the function is function return value. See here, my function does not have any return value. And if you go and above here, my function has a return value. The same thing. Our function, or whenever I'm writing a function, my function can have input, my function can have body, and sometimes my function can have output, and sometimes it cannot have. So it is a choice. And one thing that I need to mention here, my function can return one value, or it can return multiple values. See, for example, if I give an exact example, if we have a function called define, if I want to swap the two values, for example, if I have the a, inside a I have stored 90, I have b, and inside b I have stored 890, and then I want to swap this value. For this one, I have to define a function called swap. So it will take two input a comma b, and then it will change the value of, I want b to be 90 and I want a to be 890. I want to swap their values. How it will do, usually that we will take a temporary variable and we will store the a value inside temporary variable, and then we will say a is equal to b, and finally we will say b is equal to temp, temporary variable. And then I can return two values, a comma b. See, sometimes I can return only a, sometimes I can return multiple values also. Now, if I want to use this function, I will say a comma b is equal to, I will say swap, I'll say a comma b, and then I will print. If I want to print the a value, the a before it was 90, now it must be 890. If I run the program, see, A is 890. If I run the B value, the B was 890, now B is 90 value. So my aim was this, that I have a function called swap. It is taking two input and it's returning also two values. So it can return one value or multiple values. The last topic that we will be discussing about this is the scope of variable. Now let me clear this. That's why we are discussing about the scope of variable. For clarification, let me take an example. For example, if I have a defined function 1, and then inside this function 1 I have a variable called x. Inside x I have stored 890. If I want to print, I can print, I will say x value is, and then I can print the value of x here. There is no issue with that. See, let me come here and call this function f1. Since if I run it, it will say the x value is 890. Again, I want to print the x value here. See, again I want to print. If I run it, it will say name error. It say x is not defined. So what is the reason that when I'm giving x inside this function, it is printing me the value of x as 890, and when I'm coming out of this function, it's saying that I'm not understanding what is x. So for this reason, let's discuss scope of variable. Scope of variable shows that until which place or until which area a variable is usable, we can use that variable. For example, see, this x is usable inside this function, but outside this function this x is not usable. What is the reason? Let's come and discuss this one through. The first one is built-in. Built-in is a scope where it can be used anywhere inside Python. For example, the function called print. Print has a built-in scope. In every Python, if you go and type print, it can understand print. It will never give the name error for print, since print has a built-in scope. The second after that is global. Global, whenever we are defining a variable outside a function, that's scope of that variable is global. For example, if I have an value called y is equal to 100, this is outside a function. And then if I have defined f1, and this is inside function, but y is outside function, so it has a global scope. If you come to the local, when I have a variable and I'm defining that variable inside a function, for example, see, x is inside f1, so x, this one is local and y is global. Why? Because y is defined outside function and x is defined inside function. So that's why I can use only x inside this function. I can only print x. I can say x is the value for x is, I can only use x here. But y, since y is global, I can use y anywhere. I can use y outside the function, I can use y inside the function, anywhere that I can use y. So let's discuss this one. If I have f1, see, if I run it, see here x is 79, but if I run here x, it's not understanding x. Why? Because x is local. X is local only. We can use x inside this function. But if I'm talking about y, we can use y anywhere. See, why? Because y is global. And lastly, we will discussing about including local. This including local will happen only if we have nested function, if we have one function inside another function. Let me discuss this example once again here. So if I have another function inside this one, if I have another function defined f2, function number 2, and then if this inside this one I have another variable called z. For example, z is equal to 200, and then I can print the value for z. I will say z is, and then I will print the value for z. So now let's discuss. We know we have three variables. Y, we know that since y is outside the function, it's global. We know that x is also inside the function, z is also inside the function. So what about x and z? What will be their values? Which one is global and which one is local? So since I told you including local will happen only if we have nested function, we know that the function f2 is inside function f1. So now, so we will say that z is local, but x is global with respect to z, is local with respect to y. That's why we are saying that x is including local. We will not say that x is local. If you say x is local, then z is also local. So that's why we'll say z is local, but x is including local. So this is the topic that's coming with including local. And the end. Thanks for watching. Please, if you like the video, please subscribe and comment.